Everyone, and welcome to our Ask Me Anything session with industry experts. Today's session is going to be all around accelerating startup growth in 2022. We'll be touching on DevOps, finance, marketing, and sales. As our panelists begin to log on, I want to just quickly walk you through what today's going to look like. So first, you can expect that we'll open with some curated questions. These are questions that we're hearing from founders today around their specific areas. Feel free throughout the entire session to submit your additional questions via the Q&A feature. We'll also be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you accidentally drop them there, that is okay as well. Love to see chat comments and engagement. So feel free to share at any moment that you hear something that resonates with you. And then we'll also share the recording of this session at the end. So no need to jot down every single goodie that you hear. We will be sending a recording. But that being said, I want to be able to introduce you to our panelists. First, I realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm Aaliyah. I manage partnerships at HubSpot, specifically with investors, accelerators, incubators, and excited to be here with you all today to not only represent HubSpot for startups, but to bring some industry experts from our partner ecosystem to help you all navigate accelerating your startup in 2022. But that being said, I will kick it over to our main moderator today, Brittany, to introduce herself as well as the panelists. Brittany, you can take it from here.
Great. Welcome everyone. Again, as Aaliyah mentioned, we have a few panelists who are going to be jumping in here shortly. When they join, you'll be able to see their lovely faces. But to start off the bat, we'll have Gil Roeder, the director of HubSpot Center for Inbound Advertising, Ben Fowler, who is the SVP of Strategic Partnerships, and Rob Zuber, who is the CTO at CircleCI. In the meantime, Rob, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Zuber, CTO of CircleCI. I guess you can get that much from the slide. I've been with CircleCI for almost 8 years now, grown from fairly small. We were post Series A and about 14 people to, I'll just say, decent size. I mean, what are descriptions? We're coming up on 700 folks. Many rounds of funding later over that time period, and continuing to grow as a company. So that in itself, as we talk about scaling organizations, there's lots to look at. And then prior to that, spent most of my career in startups of various forms, small and large, been through multiple acquisitions, et cetera. So always from a fairly technical perspective. Have dabbled in other roles and not done too well in most of them. So sticking to my lane. Cool. I see Ben's on now, so I'll hand it over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Rob. Got to catch the tail end of that, but I checked your profile out beforehand, so it's an impressive background. Hard to follow. Yeah, by way of quick personal background on the mostly professional side. I kind of got my entry point into entrepreneurship originally, starting a small business in college. Then, as most American entrepreneurs do, we tend to seek the West and come to California. So worked at a fintech company in LA doing business development. Ended up coming to the Valley to start my own for a year. Good failure there. Some definitely learning through pain type of experience. And then ended up at a role at a program called StartX that's focused on servicing the Stanford alumni community, including professors, students, and alum. Running their corporate and VC partnerships. So this was just an amazing opportunity for me to get reps in, seeing lots of different companies at different stages in different industries, everything from genomics through, consumer-esque type of apps, and just getting to both help companies raise in the pre-seed and seed phase with introductions and looking over decks and narratives and those kind of soft skill things that tend to come in play pretty heavy in the early stage where you don't actually have real numbers to point to, kind of 0 to 1. And then the other side of that was helping them sell into Fortune 500. So a nice amount of exposure across some different industries when it comes to enterprise sales and looking to set up kind of partnerships with larger organizations. Fast forwarding, I spent some time in Asia, set up an accelerator there after StartX or with the Singaporean government and a program called Google for Startups. Did some VC work and some scouting, and then came back and got an incredible opportunity where I'm at now, which is with SVB, who used to actually be a client of mine when I was at StartX, supporting founders coming out of what we consider tier 1 accelerators. So that's your Y Combinators, StartX's, Techstars, etc. So getting to continue somehow still getting paid to go help people build companies and fulfill their dreams. So I cannot complain.
Awesome. Thank you both for your intros. I believe you're still waiting on Gil to join as well. Aaliyah, if you happen to know if Gil is on the line or having trouble logging in.
Gil is still logging in, but we can go ahead and move forward with our questions.
Amazing. Great. So we'll go ahead and kick off with a few general questions. Our first question will be, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen companies face when scaling their companies respectively? This is a question for all three of you. So Rob or Ben, whoever wants to take it first, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'll give it a start. I mean, there's everything is hard. There's so many areas to dive into. So I would say the thing that I've probably spent the most time thinking about over the last 8 years in terms of scaling is people. And so as a CTO, like someone who ostensibly comes in, thinking about technology and then apply that to whatever role you might be in, marketing, finance, whatever you're bringing to the table, as you start to grow, your problems are about getting people lined up around what you're doing versus doing the job. And I think that's a really hard transition for a lot of people to make. A lot of us start companies because we're excited about the things we're capable of doing versus, growing teams to do those things. And so I see that in two main areas. One, I guess I'll just call it making that shift in general and even building the toolkit to make that shift. But two, identifying that needs to happen. I think so many founders and leaders at multiple different stages are focused on yesterday's problem instead of tomorrow's problem. And finding the sweet spot, I think, is huge, and it's really hard. It's almost impossible. It's like knowing you're in a financial bubble. You don't know until you're out of it, sort of thing, and then you have to scramble. But getting better at again, identifying. I'm transitioning to managing some people and setting vision and direction for them. I'm transitioning to managing people who manage people, and how I communicate changes again, how I think about time horizons, what we're working on. It's really easy to stay in the urgent things and lose sight of needing to build out that larger organization, which at some point is going to be the only thing that allows you to continue scaling.
Strong. Yeah, I'll probably preface my input here and say that I haven't been part of a scaling organization. Almost all my experience pre-SVB was Series A or earlier, maybe like Series A plus, like pushing on a B. So what I'm saying is somewhat extrapolated and should be taken with a grain of salt, especially because Rob's actually scaled orgs. I would say good hygiene, things that I've seen, and actually what I should say, I didn't expect that when I joined SVB that I was going to be getting my growth experience, but the company has 2.5x since I've come on board because of the amount of money that came in during 2020 to the innovation economy. And because SVB already has such a large market share, a lot of that money, almost 60% of it all came directly to the bank. So the bank grew more in deposits in 2020 than it did in the first 35 years of it existing. And so I guess from my startup experience, I would say what I've seen of people on that fringe of transitioning from A to B and their teams going from 20 to suddenly 50 plus is, I think, good hygiene really helps, like the unsexy things. Do your teams take notes? Are your folder structures strong? Are there clear roles? Is it documented? A lot of those things that like seem maybe quite menial, but actually as things get bigger, they tend to fray out and teams fall apart or misalign. I think this is like that good hygiene stuff is really critical. And then at SVB, I think what we're experiencing now is, and I can speak from it, our team has gone from 2 people to now 6. And our larger part went from 10 to 50. But it felt like when we first came on, you can get away with a lot of informality because you're all working so closely, or you have like everybody wears different hats and you're very in tune. But suddenly you stack on another 5 colleagues every month and things start to become a little bit further apart, and that cultural element can become a piece. So I think that like 2 things to think through is, one, it's nice to have organic and it's fun. And that's kind of the phase I love, is the 0 to 1, 10-person team, everybody shoulder to shoulder and that grind. But the other element too is like, yeah, having good discipline early on and keeping that as you scale, and then being really intentional about culture and not having old heads roll off when things start to change. And suddenly you have somebody who had their fiefdom, but now works, say like your head engineer, who's an absolute all-star, is now all of a sudden on a team with 10 other people. And are you still focusing on that talent, making them feel acknowledged and retaining them? Because Rob's totally right. Like, everybody says that it's a cliche, but it really is. It's people, people, people. And now that it's harder to hire and more expensive to hire than ever, I think that's quite critical.
Yeah, I think that's such a great call out on that. I appreciate bringing that up. The early people, and like the whole company changes, and the environment in which they operate changes. A lot of the things for those early people that they appreciated or loved about how the company worked are effectively required to change. And so sometimes it's not actually the best for that person to stay another 5 years, right? It just might not be the right environment for them. But I think we expect people to just transition. Oh, now you're part of a team and you got to act like a team member, as opposed to doing all the things that we appreciated from you last year. It just doesn't work that way. You need to spend real time with those folks, as you said, Ben, and understand what it is that motivates them, and create the space for them to be really effective and impactful on the organization, which is it's a tricky road to walk, but I think it's a really important thing to call out.
Awesome. Great. Our next question is, what should an early stage startup consider when beginning to build and scale their organization?
I'll start again. I mean, I'm going to lean a bit on the stuff that Ben was talking about. I like to think of everything in buckets, because it makes my brain, like, I don't know, not explode, or categories, however you want to think about it. I think there are things that are cheap to invest in early, and things that are really expensive to invest in early. And there's probably a spectrum, but let's call them buckets just so we can talk about it. And Ben was talking about hygiene. Like, I think there are things that are actually even cheaper to do out of the gate. And I don't know what they are for every organization, but I'll try to pick some examples. Like documenting your values, right? Saying, okay, there's only 5 of us and we work really effectively together because we all know each other, whatever it is that got your company off the ground. But that stuff breaks down really fast. As soon as you start expanding the way you're hiring, which you're going to have to do pretty quickly, and you probably want to do, like everybody that knows each other already and doesn't call BS on each other's ideas, like that's a bad thing, right? You want different perspectives, but you want to make sure that folks are aligned with the values. And it's actually, like, I can't think of something that's cheaper than, when you have 3 or 4 people or whatever, to just write that down. This is what we believe. This is how we operate. This is what makes us us. And doing that when you have 200 people or 500 people, and trying to get everyone, back into alignment with your unstated perspective, is really, really hard. And then, go the other way. Like, I don't know, it's so easy to pick examples from tech, but the things that are expensive to do early and you can figure out later, like, you don't need microservices to figure out if you have a business or not. I'm just going to declare it. I'm so confident in that fact. And so don't build a bunch of stuff that you don't know you need yet. Like, build the cheapest possible thing, because whatever you build, you're going to throw it out. Right? So build cheap, build light, learn as fast as you can.
So true.
Use a landing page. If you can do it in a Google Doc, do it in a Google Doc. Get some feedback. Find out if you have an idea. Buy a bunch of domain names. If no one signs up for your business, try something else. Like, yes, you should be confident and have a vision and everything else, but like, people, especially in engineering, we love to overinvest, because we're, what if 1 billion people sign up tomorrow? You know what? 1 billion people are not going to sign up tomorrow. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break it to you. Even the overnight successes took 10 years to get there, right? So again, find the things that are cheap and have real long-lasting value. I'm writing down your values as an example. There are plenty of them. Just reason about that question. What's expensive to do now that I can defer? Big technical investments, brand marketing, whatever. Be scrappy, find scrappy ways to do that stuff and defer it.
So on point. As you're saying these things. I mean, they're two slightly different pieces to it, right? Like starting to build and starting to scale are very different pieces. And I think Rob's touching on some of the really early things, which I think is so true. If you're just getting started or just building your company, and this stuff is like, and maybe I'm biased because we live and work in the Bay and it's kind of ubiquitous, but there's definitely a lot of like material out there on this. But rather than thinking about the whole business and how to monetize and how to raise money and all these things, there's some type of belief or hypothesis that you have for your company, and underpinning that has to be some set of assumptions. And so finding the quickest, lowest cost way to stress test those assumptions will solve you a tremendous amount of time and effort. And thinking about it less so, how can I make this business succeed? But also like being humble enough and open to the fact that you may be working on something that will not succeed and that may not be needed in the world. And the entrepreneurial process can be a search for finding something that's actually worth building, that's a real need, rather than this binary of it's good and bad, but it's actually like a path to discover. I know it's like a little bit ethereal, but you know, the small things is exactly what you're saying, right? Like if you think that people might be really interested in buying purple t-shirts, but you're not really sure, then take $500, go run some LinkedIn campaign with a landing page and see the traffic that you get and test different demographics, or like go stand out on a corner of the street and try to sell purple t-shirts. Like it's as hustly and unsexy as it can possibly be. And these things really get dressed up a lot because it's become like founders become a phenotype, but it is embarrassing, shameless, unsexy things that will kind of help you get started off. And maybe, yeah, I would say that. And then on the pieces to scale, I think we kind of already maybe touched on that, but we can go more if there's people that have questions about it.
Great. No, great answers. Our next question will be
actually, sorry, one thing I want to say. I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is what I wanted to say. Be super intentional about who and how you hire, because it can make and break you. It's not even just the money that it takes that you sink in people, it's a time and effort. And the culture of bringing people on and losing them hurts really bad. And it's very difficult to come back from. The like tactical advice I would give is don't hire based just on pedigree and brands. If you are just starting off and you're setting up your first HubSpot campaigns, and like, because I've used HubSpot twice at companies, I've seen this play out. Don't hire the head of marketing from the most impressive company that you can possibly find. It is a completely different skill set. That individual is used to having $100 million budget, 100 people that work for them, and a whole division of specialists, and they kick butt at that. They're great at leading a corporate team, but are they going to be sitting watching instructional videos on how to set up HubSpot and going through one by one and trying different copy and doing all that really tactical stuff? Probably not. So yeah, tactical piece there is like, they're bright, shiny objects when you're early, like big hires or big investors or big clients, but just kind of keep your eye on the prize and what's actually realistic for your phase.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Awesome. We will jump into our next question. Why has your area of expertise gained prominence over the last few years, and why is it important to a startup?
Do you want to reverse order, Ben?
I'm happy to go too. I didn't mean to keep putting you there, but yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, hopefully, why has banking gained prominence? Because I have the questions over here too for me to help, because I'm a reader. Well, I hope that banking has always had some aspect of importance. How to answer that for us? I think that banking has evolved a lot. It's a bit of a race to the bottom in that it's a completely commoditized offering, right? Like, maybe I should or shouldn't say this because I work here, but like, if your money sits at bank A versus bank B versus bank C, your money is sitting and it's largely, let's say, fine, right? Like, there's nuances to having your money insured or your interest rate, et cetera. But in the early stage, your banking needs are incredibly simple. You need to receive money from customers and you need to be able to pay people And maybe you have some elements of foreign exchange if it's more complicated, or if it's a fintech, there's payment rails, etc. But like, it's quite straightforward. What matters in the early phase is that you shouldn't know about your bank. It should be something that's quiet, because the process is seamless and it's easy. And if you do hit a hang up and you do need help, you should be able to call and speak to a human being that understands your needs. And I think SVB has maintained the position because we balance both those well. We have sucked on the tech front for a long time because we're a bank that went to go build tech, not a tech company building banking. And thankfully released that, a new online banking product in the past year called SVB Go. That's been like, I'll be the first one to critique us when we're strong and weak in an area. And I think our team actually did a pretty impressive job, especially under having to deal with like banks and the red tape there. And it's not until later on that banking becomes more sophisticated and that you look at venture debt and things like that. And I would say like venture debt, which for those of you that don't know, you can take out loans against the equity that you raise, kind of more Series A and later. That can act as either an accelerant for you if you start to run, or if you're burning through your cash quicker than you thought, or as kind of an insurance if you're not quite where you want your metrics to be and you're going to go raise your next round and you want like a 6-month extension or something to be able to get your numbers to where you want for the valuation. And venture debt in particular has started to be, it's always been around, but I think even more prominent because of the non-dilutive element of it. So like, I think this is a pretty early audience. So if people have questions, I can elaborate on this, but this is very much like later stage conversations where you're looking at avoiding dilution and timelines and things like that. So anyways, that's why banking is prominent. You're working on something cool, Rob. You take the stage.
No, I mean, trust me, as someone who didn't think they would ever think about banking, I think about banking a lot. So I will support everything you just said. Like, as an early entrepreneur, having a bank that understands what you're trying to do versus is just a place to put cash is actually it makes a difference. It makes a difference. And SVB is like the poster child of banks that actually understand what we're trying to do in this space. And I do think that matters early. And I actually want to go, just because you inspired me, I'm going to go back to the previous question. When it's sort of like things you can do well early. Clean term sheets. I'm just going to leave you all with that message. Like when you talk about poster or like marquee investors or whatever, like what matters is someone that you can work with. And this is your banking, your investors, whatever, someone you can work with and someone who's going to do it on terms that make sense for you, not someone who's going to have a big flashy name. And it turns out if anything goes slightly off the rails, is going to walk out on you and take the company with you.
Yep.
Or with them, sorry. Okay. So, I mean, it feels absurd to try to answer the question like, why is technology important? But I'll get after it anyway. I mean, I sort of, the thing that I talk about most regularly as a technology leader is people, teams, like team structure. I think that more and more of, I don't know if that's people are shifting in this direction, but we're realizing, so I'll say we're shifting over the last X number of years, whatever period we want to look at, to understanding more and more that delivering technology effectively is about great direction, team structure, team values, whatever you want to think about it, the way that your organization is structured at small scale. If we're talking early, to Ben's point, it's about bringing in people, like bringing in the right people, and the right people are often the people who are comfortable iterating quickly, throwing out ideas, saying, we tried that, it didn't work. Like, we're not building this for scale, we're building to learn, and really being oriented around that. So I think for me, technology always comes back to people. Like I'm sort of, maybe it's just a point in my career, I'm past the point where I feel like any particular new technology is really going to be the thing that moves the needle for us as a business. Like, we can apply technology appropriately, but my job, and if you're a founder listening to this, a CTO or otherwise, your job is to have in your toolkit a deep understanding of your area of expertise and to apply it to the problems of the company, not the other way around. I'm not here to build technology and hope that somehow that turns into a great company. I'm here to build a great company. And if technology is the answer to the problem, I will find the simplest, most efficient way to solve that problem with technology, not find the cool, interesting technology that's going to, make my job interesting or whatever. And that's, I will admit, when I was starting companies, I was really excited about playing with cool technologies. One of the reasons you start companies, because no one can tell you no, right? But pretty quickly, you're trying to figure out, wait a second, we have someone else's money and we have a very limited runway to figure out a business. Playing with technology is not going to be the thing that gets us there. So really, it's about, and I think so much of technology leadership has shifted this way, and I'm thankful for it, understanding how to take all that stuff in your toolkit and apply it to the problem, not I have a bunch of stuff in my toolkit, let's use it and then see if that happens to solve the problem.
Awesome. Great. So our next subject is around tech solutions. I think both of you could speak to at least some across your orgs, your respective orgs. So the first question will be, how do your solutions within your org specifically help startups to be successful?
Is that in the context of like, what's my internal tech stack for my own job, or what is SVB offering to a third party?
The latter. So SVB offering to a third party.
Oh, I mean, I can keep this pretty brief because I don't want to put people through a pitch, but as Rob, which by the way, thank you for being a client, Rob. And vouching for us. But yeah, I mean, I think that SVB, as I mentioned, it's like at the early stage, you should not have issues with your banking period where you are. It's like doctors shouldn't make mistakes, banks shouldn't make mistakes. There's certain professions that don't have room for error, and banking is definitely one of them. So like that stuff aside, I think what makes me enjoy this job is honestly things like this. But SVB is kind of known for bringing people together, whether through COVID, it's been over Zoom, but in person, no matter what market you're in, I'm pretty confident we've got somebody on the ground, and very confident if we do that, they're going to be doing dinners or events or something along the lines to bring people together. And I think that's really powerful. The StartX community was something that changed my life, and being a participant in founder communities in one way or the other, I think is very meaningful. We put out quarterly reports. I think that we sit on arguably one of the best data sets in the industry, because we have, all of the startup side. So all of the transaction data there, account balance data there, et cetera. We also bank 60% of the VC industry. So we have all that data set as well. And we have a really brilliant team that does these kind of industry level reports that I think are very valuable, because when you go out to raise, or if you're going out to hire, having comps to understand where you are in a highly subjective pricing environment, I think can be quite powerful as a leverage and a negotiation asset when you're going with investors. And then, yeah, I mean, I think my head of product is going to require me to say this, but SVB Go, our new online banking platform, it actually is good. I think that's not the slogan that the marketing team wants us to use, but it's the truth. It's actually good. And so there's a bunch of integrations there in terms of like payroll integrations, whatever you're using, and a number of other things that should make it quite easy. So yeah.
+1 to all of that. So from my perspective, CircleCI, continuous integration, continuous deployment, we focus on letting our customers focus on their business, if that makes sense. Like you could almost create a parallel story for banking, right? Like you want to be in a position as early as possible we talk about things that are useful early and hard to add later. You want to build a culture of rapid iteration. And in order to iterate quickly on your software, you want to have the tooling in place, for a good software delivery pipeline. So you want that to be out of the way, like, and my parallel to banking, like certainly you wouldn't try to do your own banking, because I think that would be illegal. But anyway, I guess people put stuff in jars in the backyard. That's not your strategy as a startup. So, we're taking all of that off your hands. It's something I believe you absolutely need. You can use as early as possible. Like you want a culture of rapid delivery. And in order to do that, you need the tooling. Great. Don't build that yourself. Focus on finding your business. And that sort of rapid iteration model will last you for a very, very long time. That's what we do. I won't go into all the details. You can look us up. But I think building a culture of rapid delivery, and in particular iteration, meaning not just I'm delivering more and more of the same thing, but I'm able to move and adjust as I'm trying to figure out how the market is moving, what we're really building in those early days is huge.
Great. Next question, then we have a couple individual questions for each of you. So I'll go with our last tech solutions question, which is how can small, fast-growing startups successfully implement new technologies into their businesses?
I guess I'll start with that. I would say, I can't remember just look up boring technology. This is always my thing. Like, there's this, I forget the author, I forget just look up like boring technology. I feel bad that I'm blanking on everything, but the answer is kind of don't. Like, you're not figuring out technology right. It's another thing that's going to make your world hard, right? Like, find the simplest way to get the answers to your problems. If you are scaling, right, you figured out your business, you're growing like crazy, and things are breaking everywhere, then absolutely you're probably going to be looking at new ways of doing things, but you're also going to be in a different world in terms of cash flow, staffing, the ability to manage all of this stuff. In the earlier stages, you're trying to find the simplest way to get answers to your problems. And the simplest way is almost never some piece of technology that no one on your team understands. Like, the blog post that you just read about how awesome that technology is probably super compelling, but you don't know how to use it. Like, is that what you want to focus on right now? Or do you want to focus on figuring out your product and finding value in the market? Like, there'll be plenty of time. I often refer to my earlier startup attempts as me, trying to solve scaling problems that I wish I had. Now I actually get to solve those scaling problems, and it's like a different kind of fun, but you only get there if you find the business. So you can generally do that with stuff everybody on your team already understands, has used before, is totally capable of running in production, and has been tested and fixed by someone else before you start using it. And so there will be one or two places that are absolutely unique to your business, right? Where you say, oh, this is the thing that we're differentiating on. If we can do this well, no one's done this before, put all of your energy into that. The thing that's going to make you different and better than everybody else, put all of your energy into that. Everything else, find a way to get it from somewhere, right? Like, what are we, 2022? I lost track of years now. You can find almost anything in a third-party service, a library, some framework that's already been built. Like, don't look for novel ideas where you don't need them. Find the simple thing that works, use it, and then invest in those one or two areas that are truly going to differentiate you as a business.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I won't have any commentary in terms of like from a technical stack, because I'm not an engineer, nor have I done that, nor would I be able to give any substantive opinion on it. But I think like kind of two sides of this coin. I'll kind of riff on Rob's point here, which is actually keeping things either simple or quite low tech in the beginning. So I'm talking about like, your business development functions or your operational models or things along those lines. So like non code related. I think that Excel / Google Sheets / Airtable is still one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful tool in business. Because something to consider is that if you use tools that require any element of writing code, you now have only limited it to the engineers that can use it. So you created a dependency on anybody who's non-technical on your team to rely on them to make every change. And inevitably you will come to a point where your engineering team is overtaxed and being asked 1,000 things. That point will just always come because there's more things you can do than they can execute on. So I think like keeping things simple in the beginning. I'm a huge believer in Sheets. It's like, or Excel now, because I work at a bank and we're not allowed to use Google products, which drives me nuts. It's another topic for another day. It's a big transition to go from G Suite to Outlook. It's like going back 5 years or 10. But yeah, I really believe in like structuring information in that way, keeping things really low tech. I think Excel is super powerful. I also think that keeping things really simple in the beginning helps you actually iron out what are your problems and what are your use case. And I think until you actually have that quite clear, you're going to be, if you don't even know your problems, how are you going to find a solution for it? And every tech you're using should be a solution for a specific problem. And I have seen people kind of go the other way around, which is, and HubSpot's an example of this, pros and cons. HubSpot, especially now, has an unbelievable feature set, right? Like you can do so many things, to the point where like there are third parties that are consultants who can just teach you how to set up HubSpot, right? If you spend all your time getting really good at HubSpot, you're not getting good at your business. But if you're taking out specific things like I need to be running campaigns, or I want to do email tracking, or I want to do, you know, landing pages and UTM codes and all this stuff, like, yeah, that's great. But knowing what you need before starting to use it, I think is really, really important. And so going from kind of that bottom up approach, then to contradict everything I just said, freemium. You know, that's one of the biggest things I miss now that I'm at a bank. You know, in order for me to use things, I have to put it through a tech approval process where a lot of those things do not hold up, because at the end of the day, your client data is more important than being able to use Calendly, which is fair. It's how this business is ran. It's how trust is the non-negotiable for a client relationship in banking. But I do miss being able to test every plugin, you know, like being able to look at Product Hunt or flicking around Reddit or StackSuite or whatever it is, you find your information, whatever people you follow, but like staying on it and testing out every new tool that's coming out, and being some aspect of a nerd and a technologist, I do think is important as well. And that will happen naturally with, if you're in founder communities, you'll kind of hear what other people are using, but having at least one person who nerds out on whatever just came out is important, and have the discipline to not go down the rabbit hole and get distracted, like Rob was saying.
Wonderful. Thank you both for your very thoughtful responses. Jumping into our speaker-specific questions, I'll start with Rob. Rob, what should growing startups consider when executing projects that require DevOps?
Interesting framing. I would say everything does when you're early. I mean, if like I sort of alluded to building a culture around rapid iteration, I think that's the foundation of a lot of what got us to DevOps as a culture and as a set of tools, however you want to think about it. Like, as you think about delivering software, you have the opportunity starting out to define how you're going to do it. Don't build walls, don't build silos, right? Have people understand the full process, and then just stay focused on moving fast. Like, do something smaller. Every single thing you're thinking about, you know, you use the word project, like whatever that is, what's the way that you could learn the same amount or 80% of that with 20% of the effort? Like, ask yourself that question every single day. Like Ben was talking about the point at which your engineers will have too much to do. Like, that's the day that you started. Every day after that, your engineers have too much to do. Like, don't think about opportunity costs. It sounds like you need a finance department to like figure out opportunity costs for you. You don't. Like, everything you're thinking about doing means you're not doing something else, right? Is it the most important thing? And if it's the most important thing, how can I get the impact for the smallest amount of effort? Because the people that are thinking like that, if they're your competitors, are going to beat you. Like, that's the mentality that you have to have. And I think that from a software delivery perspective, you know, DevOps is all about allowing us to do that, be more nimble, respond more quickly, et cetera. But if you A, apply that across the business, that's great. And B, just because you have an engineering team doesn't mean you should give them work. Like, you should only be putting things into that fast, nimble pipeline if they're going to be of the highest impact to the business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that, Rob. All right, Ben, the question for you is, what should startups consider when selecting the best financing options for their businesses?
Yeah, I'm freezing on my end. Am I coming through on yours okay?
Yes.
Yeah. We could do, I mean, there is literally a book on this. It's venture deals. We could literally do a half day on this, but I mean, short version is, and we can talk about this more depending on you guys' knowledge around fundraising, but you know, you've got pre-seed or seed rounds that are generally done on what are called like convertible notes. Like, there's industry standards around these things, and I would recommend following the industry standards. They're there for a reason. and they're shaped by an evolution of VCs and entrepreneurs. I don't want to say battling, it's too adversarial, but like, let's say shaping the same 4 or 5 variables that you're going to see in term sheets, and that sometimes they flex towards investor friendly, sometimes they flex towards founder friendly. But historically, entrepreneurs have done so well in the past 10 years that the terms that are being set generally actually do sit in a pretty happy medium, and if anything, tend to lean more towards the founder. So trying to suddenly set up an LLC and take a big loan out to start a technology company, you can do it a different model for different things, doesn't make sense when the road's already paved. So like SAFEs is an expression, convertible notes, KISSes, these are all like different acronyms for a financial instrument that helps you take in money from an investor or angels, friends and family, etc. Not have to price your company because you don't know what it's worth, and then be able to reward those investors for the risk that they've taken when you go and you raise subsequent rounds of capital, and then they do become equity because your company does have a price per share. And I can talk through that more later on. And then as it relates to us, again, I mean, from a personal incentive standpoint, like venture debt is how we make money. And yes, I want people to take it. But if you guys if we're asking questions like this, you're probably too early stage. And I wouldn't, to Rob's point, if you're thinking you're doing one thing, you're not doing something else, and you do not need to be learning the nuances to venture debt right now if you're figuring out how to incorporate or to set basic things up.
Yeah, I mean, I love using this expression in terms of technology, like do the things that are novel, that are really going to separate you, like structuring your financing. You are not going to find a way to do that better than has been done many, many times, has been pointed out. And like people maybe will try to convince you there's a new way or something, but like stick to the basics, do the fundamentals, focus on your business. Get educated, absolutely. Find partners you trust, or I would say, mentors, however you want to think about that. You talked about accelerators, other communities. Like there's tons of communities out there for whatever your role is. Find those. People have been through this before. And get advice, run your ideas by people. And I'm pretty sure 9 times out of 10 on every subject, you're going to get the, no, just do the thing that everybody does. Don't go reinvent this. I think we went through a phase as startups about 10 years ago where we tried to reinvent management. That didn't work out either. Like we're all back to managing people the way that we always did. Like sure, there's little nuances and little like tweaks that we can make, but focus on the business. Figure out what your product is or what your offering is, what your service is. Everything else, find someone you trust. Sort of pointing at, you should trust Ben. I met Ben at the beginning of this panel. You should totally, I mean, but he's got a big SVB logo behind him, so I trust him. Like, find someone you trust and work with them. Don't try to invent this stuff. And the more you can get off your plate, just cognitively, the more you can focus on being great at the thing you're trying to do. And all this stuff, I mean, partners, trust, good communities, all of that helps to say, okay, I have a clear picture. I feel confident in this. Now I'm going to go back to focusing on the business. Like I have customers, or I'm trying to get customers, or whatever. That's where all your energy should be.
Totally. There's enough hard things that you're gonna have to figure out every day. Like, don't make simple things hard. Yeah, I was
exactly
answering questions on a Reddit thread the other day because there's this founder who was like asking about they're an LLC and should they incorporate in Delaware and do a C Corp model or C Corp structure, etc. And there's this whole back and forth. And the sentiment of my message was like, even writing this thread out was a waste of time. Like there is a complete and utter paved road on how you do these things. The liability has been thought out. It is a really, there's a bunch of service providers that want to make money on you for doing these things that are very simple. Find a fair rate, pay them, and move on. Because the stuff that you're doing that's going to be hard is all the new things that you're doing to progress it. And you're not making innovation on setting up it as an LLC versus a C Corp, or where you do and don't want to incorporate. Like that's the original point. Like, don't make simple things hard. It's already going to be hard enough if you're choosing to start a company.
Yeah. But it's fun. It's really fun. Definitely do it. Just know what you're getting into.
It definitely takes a profile person. You got to love the, like, yeah, you got to love, for me, I love the 0 to 1. I love the having to take an idea that isn't real and somehow making it tangible and convincing others, and that part. You gotta definitely love that.
Yeah, well, I'll just agree. I mean, I enjoy where I'm at, but have always enjoyed the search, like the puzzle of, I think there's something here. How can I turn it this way? Can I turn it this way? And I'm pretty sure that's the audience. Like, huge amounts of respect for everyone who's willing to go on this journey. It's super fun, but it's hard. It's hard work, and yeah, don't make it harder for yourself.
Awesome. Love that response. Love the whole response. Since we don't have any responses in Q&A, I'll go ahead and give you both my final closing question, which is, as a business leader, how do you gain buy-in from your stakeholders? This can be direct reports, board members, etc., when implementing a new solution.
I can grab this one. It's funny because I've listened to so many people on so many panels, and my thoughts are always like, oh, it's like kind of fluffy and not applicable, but now I'm realizing kind of why, and trying to keep things tactical, because they are cliches until you figure it out. Understanding the human being on the other side. I think that's like the number one thing that has worked well for me professionally, is just, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true. Leading with empathy. Empathy is an SVB expression, and it actually is really, really true. When I worked at startups, I try to be really intentional about whoever my audience is and what I'm getting, and disconnecting myself from my own idea and my own ego. Of like, you don't owe me anything. I'm coming to you in your life that is already going the way that it is, and the role that you have, and the way that you manage your time, and I'm trying to add something to your plate. It is not your job to just do what I'm asking. It is my job to fundamentally understand your role, your priorities, your tensions, etc., and craft either what I'm asking you to do to make your life easier or better, or for me to, in a different way, provide you some type of value that is going to be equivalent or greater than the thing I'm trying to ask from you. And I think that, like, getting off this pedestal, and like, not in a mean way, but our pedestal of entitlement, that because we've asked somebody, they should do it, and looking at a really, really neutral, just primal, like, what are the first principles of what's going to actually get this to go through, has been, what I thought would make me effective before, but then I realized in small teams, it's actually a lot easier to do. Once you get into big companies and you have conflicting interests all the way up at the highest level, and you don't have vision into the nuances to why those exist, it becomes a much more complicated puzzle, to use Rob's words, but it also becomes really, really fun. It's really fun when you can get bigger, more complicated puzzles to really fit together. So to make that all very tactical, it's be really thoughtful about and listen really hard and ask the right questions, and understand on a deep level who the audience is and who you're trying to ask them from, and then shape your ask around that, not the other way around.
Love it. I'm a huge fan of is it Chris Voss? Never Split the Difference. Great book on, it's titled as negotiation, but everything in life is a negotiation based on that book. And like, really, to Ben's point, sort of understanding the person you're communicating with. What is it that, this is a person who did FBI hostage negotiation. Like, it's legit, but what is it that the other side's trying to get, and how can I, or what matters to them, and how can I understand that, and how can I work within that framing? I don't think I have a ton to add. The thing that I was thinking about, especially as an engineer by trade, is we love data, but data doesn't connect with people usually. Like, don't believe that your data is the thing that's going to compel everyone. Like, you need that understanding of what matters to them, and you need a story or a narrative around it that explains what the difference is. I think that's one big thing I would say. The other thing I would call out is surround yourself with people who are going to question you. If everyone else around you that that works for you or whatever is like, yeah, that's a great idea, find new people. Like, if you don't have that, especially if you're trying to build a business, you're in trouble. Like, you're going to have some I have a long list of terrible ideas. I'm not going to use everyone's time reading them out, but like, you're going to have bad ideas. And if you don't have people around you who are going to say, are you sure about this? This doesn't sound like it's going to work at all. you're going to be in trouble. And so then you find yourself, trying to, okay, you can use all this. You can bring the data and your narrative and understand the other person and convince them to do something. And now it's on you that you just push through like a really terrible idea. Make sure that you're surrounded by people who are going to ask really tough questions. Not in like a, we can't make any progress kind of way, but in a, oh, now we feel really good about this because we've looked at it from every angle and this is going to work. Like, let's go do this and do all that in about 30 seconds because you don't have time.
That's a really good point about feedback. Like feedback culture is can't be oversight. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was all of our questions. Doesn't look like we have any questions in Q&A. So I just wanted to thank you both so much for your time. And as we're getting all logged into the Zoom webinar, really appreciate your patience here. Aaliyah, any final thoughts from your end?
Oh, that's it for me, but I would just echo Brittany and saying thank you so much for joining us. I was taking notes myself as a founder. I forgot to mention I work at HubSpot, but also run my own business. So thought that all the insights were really valuable. So thank you.
For having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.